This Saturday is UFC 303, Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka 2, and what a pay-per-view this is. It's not the pay-per-view we were promised many months ago or even 3 weeks ago when the original main event was Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Co-main event was Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree, which then shifted to Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg, which then shifted to whatever it is now, Anthony Smith versus Roman Delit, because it was Ulberg versus Anthony Smith, but that's besides the point. I am going to go through the entire pay-per-view main card, briefly discuss each fight, and grade UFC 303 on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being the worst pay-per-view of all time, 10 being the greatest pay-per-view of all time. And I'm going to answer the question whether or not you should purchase UFC 303. Now, before I get into talking about any individual fight, do me a favor, comment down below, what grade would you give UFC 303 on a scale from 1 to 10? Now, I'm going to do this video a little bit different than I've done in the past. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments if you want me to continue to do this in the future. But first fight opening up the main card. By the way, the bout order is terrible. I don't know who's doing this bout order, but they deserve to be slapped. They deserve to be Boston crabbed. But first fight on the main card is number 7 ranked Ian Machado Garry versus number 14 ranked Michael Venom Page. This is a great matchup. I like this matchup quite a bit. It's not the matchup a lot of us wanted. I recently did a video about this, which I'll link down in the description if you want to go check it out. It was supposed to be Ian Machado Garry versus Colby Covington. I know a lot of fans would have ate up the drama in the lead up to the fight. I know a lot of fans would have been excited for some press conference exchanges. Now, me personally, I didn't care about that. I wanted to see Garry tested against a high-level wrestler with really good stamina. But at this point, Colby Covington's ruined his career. He ducked Garry. He talked all that crap. He ran because he's terrified and he's a beta male. And the UFC put together a really good fight. Ian Machado Garry versus Michael Venom Page. I know a lot of people are thinking striker versus striker, and that may end up being that way, but Garry has grappling in his back pocket. He uses grappling a lot in Cage Warriors. But I think overall this has the possibility to be a really good striking match if it doesn't end up with Garry mixing in the grappling. And Michael Venom Page, I know he's kind of known as a can crusher, but his style can be very confusing to his opponents, the way he darts in and out. And he always goes out there. One thing I do like about Michael Venom Page, he always goes out there and looks to put on a performance for the fans. And this is super meaningful for the division. I mean, Garry wins this fight. And I know people are going to say, well, he's number 14. If he wins this fight, he's going to be in a very big fight in his next fight. He said, look, I want one of these guys ahead of me. I want Kobe. I want Kamaru. I want Shavkat. I want Bilal. I want Leon, whoever it may be. If he beats Michael Venom Page, I think Garry's one fight away from a title shot, depending on how the division lays out. Like, obviously, we have Leon versus Bilal coming up, and then Shavkat's most likely next, and we have potential of Jack Della Maddalena. But either way, I think Garry, if he wins this fight, he's going to be in a big fight in his next fight, and then he'll be pushed towards a title. Michael Venom Page, if he wins this fight, he puts himself at the top of the division. So this is a very meaningful fight for the welterweight division. They're both highly skilled, in my opinion. I think Michael Venom Page, a lot of people are hyping him up a little bit too much because of the fact that they don't like Garry and they want him to lose. But ultimately, I still think he's a fun fighter, and I think he's a very good striker who just has a hole in his game in terms of the grappling. And also, this is just a matchup that I think is really fan-friendly. Not only is it, two guys who are considered the elite of the elite or getting there. I know Garry, hasn't fought the best opposition yet, but coming off a win over Jeff Neal, I think he looked pretty solid, even though people degrade that performance. And Michael Venom Page basically dominated Kevin Holland. Now, I think Kevin Holland's a bit of a bum, so I think Michael Venom Page has a bit to prove, especially in the UFC welterweight division, where there's a lot of grapplers. But I love this fight. I don't know why it's opening up the main card. I know Dana says, oh, well, this is the best spot to be. For me as a fan, I hate that this opens up the main card because I like to see kind of fights in order of what I'm looking forward to. I hate watching a really good fight and then a fight I don't really care about and then a really good fight and then a fight I don't care about. Not that there's a lot of that here, but either way, it's kind of weird that this is opening up the main card. Next fight on the pay-per-view, Myra Bueno Silva versus Macy Sasson. Is this really what we're looking at here? Is this really what we're looking at? I know that Macy Sasson and Myra Bueno Silva are towards the top of the division. What were they actually ranked? Number 3 versus number 7. Yeah. Myra Bueno Silva lost to Raquel Pennington in her last fight when she was fighting for the title. Macy Sasson coming off a win over Pannie Kianzad. This should be on the prelims, boys. This needs to be on the prelims. This honestly is a massive hit to UFC 303. I'm not looking forward to this matchup at all. I hope that Myra Bueno Silva gets a first-round submission. I think she does have the grappling advantage. I've already done my full card predictions. If you care to check that out, I'll link it down in the description as well. But this fight has no business on a main card of International Fight Week. And I know it's only Monday. They can shift it around. But yeah. I mean, are they considered, I guess, the elite of their division? At least Myra Bueno Silva is. Macy Sasson's trading wins and losses 9-3. Got up-kicked, TKO'd by Irina Aldana. Lost to Raquel Pennington in her own right. I mean, her last two wins, Pannie Kianzad, Norma Dumont, and then before that, Mariana Renault, who's like 75 years old. I really don't know what you guys want me to say about this fight. I hate that it's on the main card. I hate that we're even talking about it right now. So, you know what? That's all I have to say about it. I hate this fight. I think it ruins the UFC 303 main card. Bare minimum, it should just open the main card. That way we can be like, okay, get it out of the way. I don't care. And I'm not one of these people who hates on women's MMA. I'm not one of those people. I just don't like this fight, especially as a main card fight. Like Myra Bueno Silva, Kayla Harrison, sign me up. But Myra Bueno Silva, Macy Sasson, main card, not even an opener, International Fight Week. How far have we fallen? Look at UFC 290 last year. I mean, the difference is crazy. Up on the card. Featured fight, right? Yeah, featured fight on the card. Anthony Smith versus Roman Delit. Anthony Smith's ranked number 10. Roman Delit coming up from middleweight. Both on short notice. The top three fights are all on short notice, which, I mean, is a bit odd. You know, how rare is that to have the top three fights all put together on short notice? It was originally supposed to be Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Then Khalil Roundtree fell out. They tried to sign Jamal Hill's brother to step in so we could get that rematch from Thanksgiving. Jamal Hill's brother wouldn't sign, so we had Carlos Ulberg step in. Then Jamal Hill fell out. Then we had Carlos Ulberg versus Anthony Smith. Then Carlos Ulberg fell out. And then we have Roman Delit. So, and I don't even know if I went through that correctly. So, just to recap that, I might have misspoke there. Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg versus Anthony Smith. And then Anthony Smith versus Roman Delit. I really don't know what to say about this fight. Anthony Smith was a dead body. We found a faint pulse on him. Is he going to, honestly, if they were going to do short notice, I wouldn't have mind Pereira versus Anthony Smith on short notice, just for the meme of it, because Anthony Smith does have a path to victory in the grappling. I know people call him delusional. He does say a lot of wonky, crazy shit, but it would have been funnier just to throw that fight together on short notice. But like Roman Delit looks like shit at middleweight. I mean, what's he coming off a loss against Nasruddin, I believe? Yeah, he's lost against Nasruddin, lost against Marvin Vettori, up a weight class against Anthony Smith, doesn't really ever incorporate his jiu-jitsu. Got ranked at middleweight because of his win over Jack Hermanson in a fight that he was losing where Jack Hermanson just messed up and ended up in a calf slicer. Are they both semi-decent fighters? Sure. Anthony Smith's on the outskirts of his career. And, I think is suffering from CTE a little bit, saying delusional statement after delusional statement. I know he's going to win. He's going to call, if he wins, he's going to call out Alex Pereira. But who knows if I don't think that's ever going to happen, most likely. But yeah, I mean, this fight, I guess the UFC salvaged it, but it's just weird because both guys are now coming in. I mean, Anthony Smith's known about the fight for, 2 weeks? Stepped in against Ulberg, which I think would have been a fun matchup, a good test for Ulberg. But now it's like, we got a middleweight who's not even good versus Anthony Smith, who's on life support at light heavyweight on short notice. It's like, are we just having fights to have fights at this point? That's what it feels like. So I don't really care for this matchup too much. But overall, I think it could be decently exciting. So, and I think they're decently high level, not the elite of the elite. Roman Delit, I think he's kind of a fluky top 15 middleweight, if I'm being honest now. I'm thinking about it. But Anthony Smith definitely has earned his place where he's at. Coming off that win, a lot of people thought he was going to get destroyed by Vitor Petrino. Came out there and got the submission. But overall, don't care for this fight that much. Next fight on the card. Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez. Let me check something real quick. So Brian Ortega is ranked number 3. Diego Lopez is ranked number 14 here. This is the ultimate privilege. Oh, wait, never mind. There's a Brazilian flag here. I thought for a second Diego Lopez might have been fighting out of Dagestan or the Caucasus region. I take that back. This is no privilege at all. Number 14 versus number 3. I take that back. This is a banger fight. This is an incredible matchup. I am really looking forward to this fight. I've been campaigning for this fight for a while, actually. And I know it sounds crazy even before the Sadiq Yusuff win for Diego Lopez at UFC 300. I've wanted this fight. I hate that it's on short notice though. But overall, this should be a banger. Neither guy really has the crispest striking or the most technical striker. But you have Brian Ortega, who is super durable, can take damage, can come back, can find submissions, has good stamina. Striking has been getting better technically. And then you have Diego Lopez, who has nasty finishing ability on the feet, nasty uppercuts against Sadiq Yusuff, and they both have elite ground games. Both can find a submission. I think the jiu-jitsu could lead to, the high-level jiu-jitsu could lead to a lot of good scrambles between these two. And it's super meaningful in the featherweight division. So I'm really looking forward to this matchup. Again, I hate that it's on short notice. I hate to keep mentioning that over and over and over again. But it's basically every fight on the card, so I'm going to have to continue to mention it. I mean, if Diego Lopez wins, he's right up there at the top of the division, knocking on a title shot. I know that sounds crazy, but Diego Lopez has a fan base backing him. He's super exciting. He's Brazilian, but he's training out of Mexico, so he kind of has that Brazilian-Mexican fan base, you know, kind of combining together. The UFC wants to push their next kind of Brazilian-Mexican star, and he can tap into both those fan bases. And you know, Brian Ortega's kind of been a staple at the top of the division, even though he's barely been fighting, which is crazy. I mean, he fought Yair Rodriguez 3 months ago. Before that, 2 years ago, Yair Rodriguez, you know, shoulder injury. Before that, Volkanovski, that's almost 3 years ago. Before that, his last win, before Yair, the most recent win against Yair, Chan Sung Jung, 3 years, 8 months ago. So, Brian Ortega, I think, has been kind of camping on his ranking for a while. And Diego Lopez may just very well have the skills to come out here and take that number 3 spot from him and propel himself to the top of the division. And I want a Diego Lopez-Movsar Evloev rematch at some point in time. I really want that. So I love that the UFC put this fight together. And, you know, I think it's going to be a wild fight while it lasts. And it could go to decision, to be quite honest, because Brian Ortega has only ever been finished twice by TKO. And one was a shoulder injury. The other one was a doctor stoppage. So Brian Ortega can take a pounding, pause. And Diego Lopez has nasty power. He has nasty finishing ability. Ortega can snatch up a submission out of nowhere. We've seen it against Volkanovski, almost getting the guillotine. So I'm really looking forward to this featherweight matchup. The only thing I can say about this, otherwise, I would absolutely love it, is the short notice factor in it. But other than that, I absolutely love this co-main event between Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez. Next fight on the card, the main event. The main event, Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka 2. What a banger this is. I love this matchup in the light heavyweight division. It does, again, I have to mention it. I hate that this is on like 2 weeks notice. Pereira's coming in with healing up a couple broken toes, which is ironic because Conor pulled out with a broken pinky toe after Michael Chandler's had one dude on his mind for the last 2 fucking years. But these guys are both savages. I mean, Pereira brutally KO'd Jamal Hill in his last fight and memed him. He got revenge for Jamal Hill's brother. He said, yeah, I thought that house was spotless, Jamal. I thought the house was spotless. There was no reason. There was no reason to knock your brother's teeth out. So, you know, Alex Pereira coming off a big win at UFC 300 against an alleged domestic abuser where he didn't really get touched at all. I don't even think he took any damage in that fight. And Jiri Prochazka is coming off a war at UFC 300 against Alexander Rakic where he was losing and getting destroyed against Rakic, and then Rakic started to fade and Jiri started to come back because he's an absolute savage. Jiri Prochazka is one of my favorites, if not my favorite fighter on the entire roster to watch, just because he is elite, but he's so unique and wild and crazy. And I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than this. It's the light heavyweight title. So this has a lot riding on it for a short notice fight. And style-wise, it's so intriguing because Pereira doesn't really have good grappling, doesn't really have good takedown defense. Jiri mixed in the grappling, at least in the first round, but then got caught in the second round, and it was a bit of an early stoppage. And now he's getting an opportunity to redeem himself here. So this is massive stakes. And if Jiri loses, he's now 0-2 to the champion. So he has to wait for Pereira to lose before he can kind of get to the top of the division again or even potentially get another shot. So a lot riding on the line for Jiri Prochazka in this fight. And then Pereira, he wasn't really too keen on taking this fight. He was in Australia for sponsors or whatever, and had to kind of be convinced. And this was the only fight they could put together on short notice for UFC 303, which was International Fight Week, because they were hoping that Conor McGregor would be able to fight through his pinky toe injury and show up for UFC 303, which I knew wasn't going to happen. So overall, this is a banger main event that I have literally no complaints about outside of the short notice factor of it, which no matter what, if you watch my channel, I say this all the time, I hate short notice fights. But this main event, I think it's the best the UFC could have done on short notice. You know, the co-main event, the best thing the UFC could have done on short notice. So overall, you look at this card, you know, if you have to really go through it, so the main event's really solid, co-main event's really solid. Don't really care for these two fights. And then the main card opener, Ian Machado, Garry versus Michael Venom Page is really solid. We're only going through the main card. I'm only grading the main card. But, like, I think if you elevated Joe Pyfer, Marc-Andre Barrios up to the main card and took maybe Myra Bueno Silva versus Macy Sasson off, I think the card overall would be better. But I think compared to the original UFC 303 main card, I think this is much better on paper, at least. I know a lot of casuals were interested in seeing Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. I didn't really care for that fight that much. I think this is much better on paper. You have fighters that have actually won meaningful fights in recent memory, and not a guy like Conor McGregor, who's been off for 3 years, hasn't got a decent win since 2016, coming back from a catastrophic injury versus a guy who sat on the sidelines, coming off a loss with only one decent win even in the UFC. So I think this card on paper is a lot better. Now, overall, how would I grade UFC 303? If everybody was here on a full camp and you had the same exact card, but you had it full camp, I would probably give it like a 9 out of 10, maybe an 8.5 out of 10. But let's operate, I would give it a 9. Let's say I would give it a 9 if this was full camp. You know what? Just for Myra Bueno Silva being on the main card, I would probably have to knock it down a point anyway. So that would be about an 8 out of 10 on full camps. And then you have to take into account the short notice, because there's an asterisk next to the top 3 fights for short noticeness. And I hate that. I absolutely despise it. As you guys can probably tell, I've been talking about it throughout the video. So if I knock it down a point to 8, I'm going to say UFC 303 is a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a great fight card. I definitely think if you're, you know, kind of in between, maybe a casual and a hardcore, I think you should definitely buy this fight card. The main event and co-main event, I feel like, are must watch. So overall, I would recommend buying UFC 303 or bare minimum going out somewhere and watching it. I think 303 International Fight Week is a very solid card. But for most fans, it doesn't matter that it's short notice. They just want to see fun fights. I think Pereira versus Jiri 2 is going to be a fun fight while it lasts. I think Ortega versus Lopez is going to be a fun fight regardless of the short notice factor in it. And I also think Ian Machado, Garry versus Michael Venom Page is going to be a fun fight as well. So I would recommend buying UFC 303. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think of my grade. Is it too low? Is it too high? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.